Welcome to episode 32 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Players. This week, it's the end of the season. The grand final has been and gone. Season 2024 has officially finished. Congratulations to the Brisbane Lions for completing their mammoth task and becoming this year's premiers. Our condolences to Sydney for, well, if you've seen the game, you know what the result is. We're going to get into it this week. So, how are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Not too bad, not too bad. I was a bit sick over the weekend, just coming off a cold. Pretty good actually from it. It was only the weekend, so it was sort of nice. On Friday, went out, celebrated the last bit of my birthday with a friend, then got sick, so I was like, what better thing to do than watch football? But yeah, grand final, obviously, bit of a damn squib, but I don't think I had the energy to celebrate a close one energy anyway. And then, yeah, just Sunday, watch the AFLW. And yeah, overall, not too bad a weekend.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Yeah, I went over to the parents to watch the grand final. On Thursday it was my brother's birthday, so I went over to the parents then as well for dinner with them, and then Saturday to my parents again for the grand final, as I just mentioned. Um, yeah, overall it was an experience. I think we
Yeah,
all
man, there's
I think we all kind of expected more out of the grand final.
yeah, but it's weird. They're not always that close, or at least not when you think. But I mean, as I said, we'll go into that, but definitely going into it, like as I said, I won't say one of the few people because actually there was a fair few people that were like, "Oh, Brisbane should win it." Um, but yeah, as I said, I was semi confident about Brisbane going into it, but yeah, it was definitely a bit concerning. The lack of effort and some of the concerns in the first quarter. Was pretty much Brisbane were set up from the first and continued on for basically 3 quarters of absolute dominance.
Pretty much. Well, we may as well get stuck into it. Although, before we get into the game itself, we are going to touch on something Brisbane related, but not grand final related, and that's the retirement
Hmm.
of Jarryd Lyons.
Yep. So Jarryd Lyons, I only just found this out just then. He was picked up in the 2010 national draft, so he is a 14-year player. Debuted in 2012, picked up in round four, picked 61 by the Adelaide Crows. Obviously, if you're a bit younger, you wouldn't know he is a three-club player.
Mm-hmm.
He was touted as a pretty exciting youngster. I got, ooh, I should look this up. I think he got traded to the Suns uh, before the Suns just is weird. They stuck with him, but they ended up delisting him at the end of 2018's. Got picked up by the Lions, had a very solid first 2 years then, and then sort of just, not went out of favour, but definitely got pushed out of the mix with the rise of some other really good players, like Hugh McCullough, Will Ashcroft, um, who else am I thinking? I mean, obviously Lockie Neal, but that was already probably there. Can't remember when that trade happened.
Dunkley was picked up,
Dunkley would have been 2021, I think.
give or
Um,
take.
yeah, so yeah, pretty much. So he just evolved into a death player, really. He was one of those ones where he was a bit of an in-betweener in terms of contested and not contested possession.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely was a pill racker, but it's not like he wouldn't get the hard ball. He did pretty solidly in clearances. Pretty probably disposal was probably his biggest knock on him. But he was, sort of a good meters game player, definitely suited that really attacking Lions MO that Chris Fagan adopted in his tenure. And yeah, as I said, it was a bit, I guess, very surprising when the Suns let him go. Um, I think I'm remembering. I'm pretty sure he got delisted by the Suns. Um, but yeah, I'll quickly look that up. But yeah, as I said, considering I know that they had a lot of good players that they were bringing up at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as I said, it's just yeah, he was delisted, traded to the Suns, but delisted. Um, and yeah, as I said, he apparently in 2021 he finished equal ninth in the Brownlow medal count. which doesn't surprise me. It was a very good year for him. I think I was playing Supercoach that year. I think he was one of the bigger rising, sort of player out of nowhere players. So I think that's how a lot of people also remember him.
Yeah, makes
But
sense.
yeah, as I said, pretty great in the clearances. Can work the ball inside 50. Uh, fair amount of scoring assists, or score involvements, I should say. Just, you know, very attacking Brisbane midfielder.
Hmm.
That, as I said, um, yeah, he's just a very solid player. 194 games, I should say. Took a while to get going in his career, but as I said, once he picked up, he was able to at least make his age prime into a pretty solid career.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves that, 2022, 2021, 2019, he played almost every game of those seasons. He
Mm.
he was very much a key player as Brisbane was still developing their midfield. And then as they slowly accrued pieces, he became more of a depth player. Had to fill in a lot when injury struck to their key players, especially when they picked up Dunkley, for example, because I think it's more of a similar role that they were playing. Um, but yeah, he's now served his time. He's now free from the 14-year career that he has had, and I hope I hope he has a successful career after footy.
Yeah. Also, I'd just like to pick up the original Adelaide trade. He was traded with pick 71 to the Suns in exchange for picks 43 and 67. And while I don't have the article that does like all the trades for the year, that is a pretty good deal for Gold Coast. I know I was only there for 2 years, but um, you know, yeah, I think yeah, it was just a bit bewildering how he got let go despite looking so solidly. Um, Obviously, probably not the best defensive midfielder ever to go around, but for you know, uh, second or third TM midfielder, supporting, making sure you still get possessions. As I said, he just seemed to really fit at Brisbane. So maybe it was just about finding the right team, but
Yeah,
very useful for a good 3 or 4 years.
in fact, I looking at his bio, I think he's actually like he's from Victoria, but I think he's like a local boy. Like I think he's from my neck of the woods, which is
Oh
kind
yeah.
of crazy. Um,
Uh,
but yeah, at
we
least
won't hold that against him.
no, absolutely not. But I mean, obviously, as all retirements, we salute you for your service to the AFL, and we have a successful career outside of football, have a good retirement, and hopefully any injuries sustained do not come back to bite the AFL in the ass. As per everything
Uh,
else that is currently going on with the AFL.
yeah. I don't think he actually got concussions that much. I
That's
think,
definitely a good thing.
yeah. I think there's another Brisbane player that you're thinking of, but
Possibly,
um,
but
I don't think who it is.
that doesn't matter right now. Anyway,
Yeah, it doesn't.
we have a
Anyway,
grand final to talk about.
yeah.
So where do you want to start?
And I guess the first quarter, because it was really the only quarter that was, I guess, remotely close. Um, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I think definitely Brisbane had a lot of the upper hand, and it was pretty damning some of the stats that they were meant to rack up in that first quarter, despite only having a 2-goal lead.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think just the first thing, and I don't mean to blow my own trumpet because I did sort of mention this last week, but the movement from halfback by Brisbane Lions, absolutely fantastic. You could tell that their fast-paced movement was really catching Sydney on the hop,
Mm-hmm.
especially when players like Errol Goulden didn't really have the best game. So it made them a bit exposed in an area, especially earlier on in the year where we imagine Sydney as this like really restricting shutdown team, restricted marking. But this was absolutely the opposite. Brisbane could just take uncontested marks out the wazoo. And yeah, as I said, apart from a few misses by Charlie Cameron and Jay Danaher early, which sort of kept the Lions from getting a bit of separation, two players that stood up right from the get-go. Up forward, you've got, up forward, Kyle Archie,
Mm-hmm.
Calamachi, and on the wings, floating up forward, Kyle Lohman. Absolutely fantastic. Lohman getting two early goals, and Kalachi having a hand in 5 of the first 7 Brisbane scores. Another one, a big name for today, we'll mention Will Ashcroft. He was also the perfect conduit between inside and outside midfield.
Mm-hmm.
He was sort of the one that was floating between. So he was pretty good, solid in the inside, but he could also provide a lot in the link ups. And he just looked like a finals veteran. While on the flip side, a lot of the veterans for Sydney were looking a bit shaky. Players like Warner, Goulden, as I mentioned, and Heaney
Mm-hmm.
having very little impact in the first quarter. You had a few players like Rowbottom, and I thought Blakey was involved in at least most of the run and carry, which kept them in it by good scoring. But yeah, as I said, from the get-go, it was a lot of marks. I think I only took it for the half, but the inside 50 marks was about I think it was like 6-1 in the first quarter, and it got even worse in the second, which I'll mention in a bit. And yeah, it just saw. I don't know. You felt like Brisbane could either get on top of it, or they were going to really regret some of the missed opportunities in that first quarter.
No, I do agree. I definitely think that if Sydney had found their second gear in the second quarter, I definitely think the early misses would have come back to bite Brisbane. Thankfully, in Brisbane's favour, that did not happen, and Brisbane managed to put the foot down pretty quickly. But yeah, that first quarter definitely it felt like it was going to set the scene for what should have happened, which was a much closer grand final than what we got. But Brisbane's halfback work, their forward work was just miles ahead of what Sydney was able to muster.
Yeah. But I think the most concerning thing, I think early was the defensive efforts from Sydney. Like throughout the whole game, there was just none.
Mm.
Like, I thought it was a minor concern. Obviously, they did well against the Port game, but obviously Port were just bombing it in. But this was really early. You could tell that it was just off, especially in that half back line. Like, sure, there was like a lot of good movements, but you just had a lot of uncontested marks in movements. You had like chains from the back half, and I think there was like 4 goals early from that back half.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
yeah. And a lot of them, there were only like a couple of touches. And when I mean touches, I meant like tackles or like, even failed tackle attempts by Sydney, getting in the way of any of it. So you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, it's just, yeah, it's just like, man, like Sydney really need to get something going. Otherwise, they were just going to get really beaten. And there was just no effort around the ground. Um, and obviously, that just sort of continued. I guess I'll move on to the second quarter. And as you like, Sydney, they were actually sort of given an opportunity to get back in it. They got a really lucky 50-meter penalty earlier in the second. That was the Robbie Fox goal where Dane Zorko encroached the mark,
He definitely
which,
didn't. It's probably
oh,
one of the
look,
only iffy umpire calls the entire
yeah,
grand final.
look, yeah. And look, I'm going to say, like, the way that Brisbane playing, we're definitely helping the umpires because, when you just limit the amount of contests there were, I guess Sydney helped by not making it a contest. It's like pretty easy to adjudicate. It's like we go off about the umpires, but some contests are just, a bit hellish to try and determine. This wasn't one of them.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
agree.
as I said, he did go over the mark a tiny bit, but it was before the umpire really called anything. And I don't think it was like egregious enough. It was just like that one step forward. You just hope that the umpire say, "You've gone over the mark, take a step back and just stand." That was all that needed to be done. I don't think that 50-meter penalty was unnecessarily. especially considering during the upcoming wave, there would be a number of examples of Sydney players doing the exact same thing. You know, which to be fair, I don't think always the umpire should double down. As much as you'd like to see consistency, I think in this case, like that one mistake was fine. You don't need to make that one mistake, mistakes for the sake of consistency, especially when they are like really big 50-meter penalties. So, but obviously Brisbane would be a bit miffed. But considering what would happen next, that would be far back in their mind. Joe Danaher in the 11th minute scored his first goal, and the score would be 4-2 to 6-7. And then by halftime, the score was 4-3 to 11-7, with 5 unanswered goals, with Lohman getting 3, Archie getting 4 by halftime. Sydney had absolutely no answers to the run. They were getting exposed 1v1 inside 50, where at the other end, their tolls were getting comprehensively shut down. Their inside 50s, I don't want to be too harsh, but it was similar to the way Port were bombing it inside 50, which is a very bad metric, of all the
Yeah, it's
teams
not
to
a
copy.
great benchmark to follow.
Yeah, exactly. And a part of that would be Brisbane trying to force some of that. But you know what I mean? It was just a bit uninspiring,
Yeah.
like I said, you don't want to, well, I mean, you can blame the tolls a bit. But, also a lot of the inside 50 entries weren't that great. They would have no spark in their midfield. A lot of their inside midfielders just kept on getting beaten. And yeah, they would, by halftime, some more damning stats. They were losing the inside 50 marks, 2-14 by the half. And at the finish, it was 9-22 in that category. So even with junk time goals, it was an absolute smashing. They would also finish the game losing the total mark count 158 to 88, which is 48 more marks than Brisbane normally generate, even though they were already registering the highest mark average in the league. So this was like a game style that absolutely, went above and beyond what they normally were able to do. Like there was just no resistance from Sydney. It was unfortunately quite poor. Considering that's the one thing you probably couldn't let Brisbane do was just, to have that free movement from halfback. Because obviously we know about Brisbane, they're not the most accurate team. So if you could limit, because I mean, two teams getting the top the grand final, both really good offensively generating stuff. Like, I don't think you're going to minimize the amount of turnovers in forward 50. I think you just had to accept that.
Yeah.
But to not limit some of that transition run, when you had really solid running play, would have been one of probably the most disappointing thing. I know there'll be a lot said about Sydney's forward line, but I think their midfield and halfback were really bad considering. And what was even worse is that while Sydney were just stuck in this constant ruck, there were actually changes from the first quarter to the second by Brisbane that also helped to get their game into a bit of flow. I think one of them was Lachie Neale. Like he had an okay first quarter, like probably top 10 player on the ground in the first quarter. And then he got a bit attuned to what Sydney were trying to do with their ball movement, played a bit more defensively, even went back near the half back line to get a few intercepts.
Yep.
And, absolutely stifled any of that. The other one I want to mention, Callum Archie. He absolutely, because as I said, Blakey was all right in the first quarter. But after that, Archie's run, like, really negated some of the influence because Blakey couldn't get any separation off Archie. I think he was actually really good in like a dual defensive, but also very attacking forward. And especially when Goulden's also having like a stinker of a game at this point. That's almost all of Sydney's run. Jake Lloyd was getting a few, even Rampy sometimes made it, but they were very stifled, very slow ball movements. Where the exact opposite was happening with Brisbane. Almost everyone was getting involved. Starcevic, Leicester. Zorko wasn't quite as good early, but his run and carry ended up increasing as the game went on. And as I said, it was just like, for 2 quarters, like, Brisbane got better than an already dominant first quarter.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, again, like the scoreline kind of says it himself. Like, Sydney's midfield just clearly was not on the park. It felt like they were either being held really well or there was so out of sync with how they were usually playing. Sydney's forward line did next to nothing. It's like they didn't really exist. Papley especially, like Papley was like nowhere to be seen for half the game. It felt like Amadi as
Yeah.
well, but that's kind of known for Amadi. Everyone doesn't pay too much attention to Amadi anymore. Um, but to be fair, like Brisbane's defense, Harris Andrews, um,
Mm.
Starcevich
Darcevic?
especially. That's Starcevich was the one I was thinking of. They did
Yeah.
so much work on intercepts. It was insane how much they managed
Mm.
to stop Sydney from getting pretty much getting inside 50 in the first place.
Yeah, and when you think about it, like Starcevich was the real was the one who took Tom Papley, and basically the only Papley goal was from like a very fast clearance, almost indefensible, really, undefendable, I should say.
Mm.
It was very defensible, but yeah, it was so there was nothing much he could do. It was like a bit of a moment for Papley, and good on him for slotting it, but he was also someone who really struggled. But yeah, as I said, to be able to influence the game both ways, I thought Brendan Spousevic absolutely fantastic. But as I said, it was that the Brisbane's ability on halfback to be both defending really solidly
Mhm.
and still generate that movement and intercept. It was a sight to behold. Because Brisbane are a solid back half team. Like they do get a fair amount of score from the back half, but they also just get a lot of score full stop.
Yeah.
And against the top, like that's an area where you could at least limit it to one. Like sometimes when you're facing the good teams, you can't like try and win every battle, but if you can at least limit one of their aspects, it gives you a chance in it, like your part of the game.
Yeah.
And I think as a coach, you really got to decide, okay, what do we need to limit so we can play really well? And obviously that interception game where they're backwards running was so bad. Yeah, they really needed to, either ask their forward to be more defensively accountable, really try and limit the amount of space, if you're not going to get those marks, at least really limit the contests, don't allow those intercepts. Or, as I said, you try and take him out the contest by, having wider leading patterns, trying to get a lot more separation so that, the intercept game, you can't just be zoning off. If you're all in a cluster, it's very easy for a defender to zone off. And, it's what we saw with Harris Andrews and Starcevich all day.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much it. And then, third quarter and the fourth quarter weren't really all that much different either.
No, I will say, like, the third quarter was, like, very impressive. Like, the foot was only off in the fourth quarter where Sydney did get a few junk time goals. But, as I said, like, they weren't giving him an inch. Like, they were like, this game's dead and buried. We're not going to give you any chance. You know. Oh, and also, in terms of gameplay, there's one thing I want to say, like, about the intercepting ability. I
Mhm.
actually recall some stats because it was so bad. Sydney, the entire night, only got one score from back up intercepts, and they lost the entire intercept mark count 20-8. So, and when I said intercepts, like, I'm talking about all intercepts, so even loose ground ball gets.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, it was absolutely poor. And amazingly, Brisbane had only three of their total 51 inside 50s turned over, which is an insanely efficient amount, compared to 12 from 49 from Sydney. So they were
That
going
is
at like
crazy.
4 times better for more inside 50s.
That's
Um,
ridiculous.
yeah, so like there was zero one-on-one pressure by Sydney being applied. Like it was historically really bad. Like if you went and dissect this grand finals, like I know we've had a lot of blowouts, But I think in terms of like specific game style,
Mhm.
like some of the stats where Sydney were getting beaten were probably on par, to Geelong, Port 2007, Richmond GWS. There's
2019.
another one, yeah, 2019. Even Geelong Sydney, 2023. Sorry,
22.
2022.
Yep.
And as we'll point out, Sydney obviously have had a really bad run of grand finals. But yeah, just to finish it off, because that's, all the stats that I think Sydney fans could probably be bearing to listen to at this time. They did have a bit of consolation at the end. There were 3 junk time goals by Luke Parker, who I thought like tried his hardest to influence the game. I don't think his was a lack of effort. I just thought like a lot of the moves to try and bring players into the games. There was moving Parker to the midfield. There was moving Blakey to the forward line in the third quarter,
Hmm.
but it was all a bit late. You know what I mean? Like they were playing catch up to a team that was just already ripped them apart. You know what I mean? Like it was stemming the bleeding for a game that had no tomorrow. So I just thought, yeah, it was just too much on the back foot. And as I was saying, like Fagan made adjustments, I felt, quicker than Longmire did. And I know you don't want to change too much in the grand final. You want to back in the game style that got you into the grand final itself.
Yeah.
But, with how bad that start was, I think you just had to, because as I said, and yeah, I actually lied. There is one thing I want to bring up, and it'll lead into what you're going to run through, which is the individual player rankings. But I wanted to point out at the start, the champion data rankings, and I know they don't mean everything, but what was really damning was of the 11 players to score under 3 for this game. So champion data rankings, like if you have 30 and above, that's like 3 or 4 in the season type game,
Mhm.
one of the best performances of the year. If you get about 20 to 25, you've had a really, really great game. If you're a midfielder, more likely. 15 to 20, is just like solid at any position. And under 5 is like a stinker. And there were only 2 players. For the 11 players to score under 3 in this game, only 2 were from Brisbane. One was Connor McKenna, which was the late sub.
He was a
He
late
only
sub in
had
the fourth quarter.
17.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. So, obviously they don't rank for time, so he just didn't have enough time to get possession, and a lot of it was junk time anyway.
Mhm.
And the only other one was Charlie Cameron, who was shockingly inaccurate. You get points taken off because a miss counts as an ineffective disposal.
Yep.
So if you have an inaccurate game as a forward, you tend to underinflate. I thought Charlie Cameron was good for pressure, but it just wasn't his game.
Yep. Agreed.
And yeah, and for Sydney, the West are all them, including all 3 key forwards for Sydney, and some of the older veterans like McInerney, Haywood, and even what we thought were the Norm Smith fancy, who we thought was the coast to coast finals MVP fancy, still might win it. Who knows? Isaac Heaney, he just,
We'll see how
yeah,
our
he had a
voting
shocker.
goes. I don't
We'll
think.
see. Look, I must admit, like I've never conspired with your votes, but if you put Isaac Heaney in there,
You're
I
gonna
think
avoid. Trust me, I did not put him
yeah,
in there. I can tell you
okay,
that now.
that's good. We can tell you now. Heaney's not getting any votes after this, so it'll have to be a cumulative effect for Heaney to win it. But yeah, he just had a stinker.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Before we actually go through all the Brisbane players, do we want to at least highlight the positive Swans players we thought played decently?
Yeah,
Because I did
look,
write down some
yeah.
stats for at least a couple of players.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, so we thought James Rowbottom was probably the only player to really play a solid 4 quarters. So he finished with 18 disposals, 15 effective, which equates to 83.3% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, only 1 intercept, 3 marks, 1 of them being inside 50, 3 inside 50s overall, 10 clearances, a 1-1 scoreline off his own boot, 5 score involvements, 4 tackles, with 1 of them being inside 50, 30 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 5 ground ball gets, with 2 of them being forward 50, and 294 meters gained.
Yep, absolutely solid match. A bit low on disposals, but I think Grobom, like, it's not really like he can be a high disposal player, but it was his pressure, His ability to win clearance when no one in Sydney looked even remotely likely to win them. So he had the most clearances with 10. Grundy had the next with 7. And then we're looking at under 3 for the rest of them,
Yeah,
which is pretty shocking.
Especially when you look at, the players that normally get high clearances being, Heaney and Goulden.
Yeah. Even Chad Warner.
That too.
He's more around the ground clearances, but I know there weren't as many forward 50 stoppages for the Sydney, obviously partially because they couldn't bring it to ground. But yeah, as I said, nothing could really nothing was really gained anywhere around the ground. Except late.
Pretty much it. We thought Robbie Fox was surprisingly consistent, considering throughout the season there's always been a bit of doubt over him. He finished with 21 disposals, 20 of them were effective, which equates to 95.2% efficiency. 10 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 6 marks, with one of them being inside 50, 5 inside 50s, 2 clearances, a goal, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, 3 tackles, 13 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, 8 ground ball gets, with 1 being in forward 50, and 335 metres gained.
Yeah, and again, Sydney's leader in scoring involvements, which is dwarfed by about, I'm just looking at here, I think it's like 12 Brisbane players with a bit more. Actually, to be fair, there's a lot on 6, so it's probably like tied 10th, but, we'll give him a bit of credit there. But, I thought he was absolutely trying. As I said, got gifted the goal, but honestly, it was probably a bit of reward. Not so much for him, but you know what? It was like a reward for him for his hard work, even if, as I said, it was very ticky-tack.
Yeah.
A good nod to him, because, as I said, I did think that they might flirt with Taylor Adams. I know he was really out of favour, but,
I don't think it would have made much of a difference going into
I don't think
what we see.
It's hard to tell because, a veteran like him who is a bit more defensively minded, it might have changed the structure. Yeah, and, all you need is a few things going, because, that's the thing about grand finals is like, once it feels lost, it's very hard for any semblance of a comeback, because there's no tomorrow. Like, as a player, you just sort of, you almost teach yourself defeat in a grand final because, it's just very hard not to get it in your head. Things can compound. Because there's no tomorrow. But yeah, as I said, honestly, I think, it would have been a mistake in hindsight if, if we saw a future into both, an instance where Robbie Fox played versus Taylor Adams, I think you're more likely to see Robbie Fox having the better game of the two. So, I said they could flirt with dropping Robbie Fox because they haven't really done much with him. But yeah, as I said, he had a really good game, so credit to him.
Yep, agreed. I thought Luke Parker stepped up. Obviously, we know he stepped up late because those junk time goals in the 4th. But I think his veterancy definitely kind of helped stem the bleeding a little bit in that 4th quarter. Not that it was really going to matter too much anyway, but in any case, he finished with 14 disposals. 7 were effective, which equates to 50% efficiency. Easy maths there. 6 contested possessions, an intercept, 2 marks with 1 being inside 50, and inside 50 as well. 2 clearances, 4 score involvements, 6 tackles with 2 of them being inside 50, 15 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 5 ground ball gets with 2 of them being inside forward 50, a spoil, and 196 meters gained. Again, it's those first 3 quarters, well, actually, it's mostly the second and the third that definitely did not favor him.
Yeah, because it said, I will say, like, again, and that's what I said about Luke Parker, like, of all the players that I saw, like, can I see them trying to at least bring a spark? Because obviously nothing went right for him, but, sometimes you just need, like, an individual performance, like we saw in Heaney against the GWS game, to maybe bring up. And I think Luke Parker was trying to do that. I just don't think the game really suited him because, him being his age, he probably needs a few more other players to like win out the clearance, maybe dish him a handball so he can kick it inside 50. But, as I said, Robbie Fox was the only one winning the clearances. And, there was just not much around him to really get up a sort of game, but you could tell he was trying. Yeah, as I said, like in terms of those spark player, as I said, I will give McInerney in the first quarter, trying to find. Not McInerney. He had a terrible game, unfortunately. But who was the same before? Kalachi, made an Australian.
Um,
Blakey.
Blakey,
Blakey.
the lizard.
The lizard. He was trying to make some fast movement in the first. I'll give him credit for that. Even Matt Roberts, was, at least tried in that first quarter to get some run and carry going. But as I said, after that, when, the bow broke, it was very few player. I think, personally, I think it was Robbie Fox, Rowbottom, Grundy, and Parker that at least try to create moments. And then, it was pretty much no one.
Well, speaking of Grundy...
for Sydney, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. Speaking of Grundy, he is the last player that I was going to mention. So, whilst he got the best of Darcy Fort in terms of head-to-head statistics, there wasn't much more that he could do as a ruck. So he finished with 36 hitouts with 15 to advantage, and 22 disposals. 13 of them were effective, which equates to 59.1% efficiency. 18 contested possessions, 1 contested mark, 4 intercepts, 3 marks, 3 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 5 score involvements, 2 tackles, 9 pressure acts, 5 1%ers, 10 ground ball gets, 3 spoils, and 251 meters gained. He was pretty much doing everything a ruck could be asked of, but there was not much more he could do.
Yeah, I'll say in the first quarter, I think he actually got limited by Darcy Fort. I reckon, like, of all of Darcy Fort's impact, because, as I said, it wasn't, like, the greatest game ever, but it was a pretty solid performance considering the circumstances. And I thought, like, Darcy Fort early was able to limit a lot of Grundy around the ground, limit some of the hitouts. Obviously, Brisbane really, not even really, I think the clearances were even by the end, but, like, at the first, they got a bit of a jump in the clearances. And I think that was, like, really important to at least start up that way. Because, like, you could say, Brady Grundy, he was one of, like, the latecomers, but you could see him pick up in the second. I think it just took him a quarter to adjust.
Yep.
Obviously it's hard when you've probably maybe faced up Darcy Fort once or twice in your career. So, as I said, he adjusted, ended up having a pretty solid game overall. Probably doesn't get Sydney's best player just because he was caught up a bit on the hop, but he was definitely like a 4-quarter trier. I definitely didn't think anything of his game was like, man, he is like contributing to bad structure, or, he's not working hard enough, or, compared to some of the other players around the ground.
Agreed. It definitely felt like it was more of like a core midfielder issue rather than a ruckman issue.
Yeah, exactly. And let's face it, like, he had no one to tap to. They were just getting beat.
All right. Let's talk about the winners. Let's talk about the victors, and let's start with the Norm Smith medalist, Will Ashcroft, the youngest Norm Smith medalist, might we add. He finished with some impressive stats. 30 disposals, 26 effective, equating to 86.7% efficiency. 9 contested possessions, 5 marks, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 11 score involvements, 3 tackles, 10 pressure acts, 6 ground ball gets, with 2 of them being in forward 50, a goal, and 436 meters gained.
Yeah, as I said, in terms of like of all the really nice scoring plays in that first half, there was 2 plays you're almost guaranteed to see in them. One of them being Will Ashcroft and the other one being Kalamachi. Like, they were just gold offensively. And Will Ashcroft, as I said, providing that link up, he could go in the midfield. I think he's still, 42% centre bounces he attended. So, still a really big contributor there, as you said, with the 5 clearances. But also, on the outside, he could work out to provide like that dual offense. And it really offered a lot of variety for Brisbane in the way that they run and carried the ball. Because, on the flip side, as we said, they were trying to run the ball through Goulden, who was very much tied up most of the game.
He was shut
So,
down
yeah.
very, very effectively. And yeah, and it's not just the stats on paper. That one Will Ashcroft, the Norman Smith. You watch his actual gameplay, just the way he moves, the way he was able to weave in and out of traffic when he was in deep in midfield. It was impressive. It was so impressive.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I mean, it's got to be like the best performance. I mean, obviously, because he won Norm Smith, but he's what, 20, 21 years old?
Yeah, he's still no, he's 19.
He's still 19.
Actually, hang on, that
Damn.
might be wrong. But
I
he's
think
still
he's
quite
at
young.
least turning 20 this year, because obviously you have to be 18 to nominate for the draft.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, 20 this year.
Yeah, there you go.
So, unfortunately, obviously, last year he did his ACL, and you always worry with a player like that. You know, it's like, especially someone like Afcott, who is, you know, very speed based. Fortunately, a lot of the times when you're younger, you don't tend to lose that speed. You can sort of work back into it. But yeah, as I said, ever since he's come back into the side, you know, Brisbane have just had so much more offensive potency. And I know it coincides with a lot of other players having excellent back half of the season. But yeah, as I said, Will Ashcroft, it was sort of nice for him to get that reward for, you know, a really solid contributor for Brisbane getting into the grand final and to get that reward for having an also excellent grand final as well.
Absolutely. All right, let's. Next player on the list is co-captain Lachie Neale. Whilst playing with an injured ankle, might we add, led from the front with 35 disposals. 30 of them were effective, equating to 85.7% efficiency. 18 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 8 marks, 6 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 1 goal assist, 11 score involvements, 3 tackles, 16 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 13 ground ball gets, and 339 meters gained.
Yeah, I mean, what a performance.
There's not much more to really
as I
say
said,
because it's the exact same sort of performance he's had all back half of the year.
yeah. Well, what I do want to say is like, not only, you know, is it his normal good contested game, but those 7 intercepts are nothing to scoff at because of the entire playing group, there were 4 players to get more intercepts than any of the Sydney players, and Lachie Neale was one of them. So Sydney highest was 5, and I know it was a bad effort, you know, but for Lachie Neale to like out intercept defenders, you know, it just really highlighted how committed overall Brisbane were to try and get intercepts and how much Sydney failed on their end to generate intercepts themselves.
Yeah, completely agreed. Like he was forward, he was back. Obviously, he's deep in midfield because that's his role. But
90% CBA. This was just because he was running so hard. Anytime, you know, he would just go back into the center, do his job terrifically, shared lead clearances. He was one behind Raybottom.
yes,
Biggest clearance leader for Brisbane. And yeah, as I said, so he was doing a lot. You know, as I said, it wasn't quite as pretty as Will Ashcroft, but really like one of the final performances you'll see, you know, for an individual.
absolutely. Next on my list is Brandon Starcevic. He was very impressive in the back line, as he has been pretty much all second half of the season. 16 disposals with 12 effective, equating to 75% efficiency. 5 contested possessions, 8 intercepts, 8 marks with 5 intercept marks. 2 inside 50s, a clearance, 4 score involvements, 4 tackles, 14 pressure acts, 5 1%ers, 5 ground ball gets, a spoil, and 321 meters gained.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think it's quite telling the whole story without mentioning Tom Papley's stats, because Papley had 10 disposals for 40% disposal efficiencies. He was forced to go up a bit higher for his possessions. He had 4 inside 50s. He took he just took the couple of marks. I think one of them was from that center clearance.
Yes, that
so
was
very
one.
hard to defend. And yeah, he kicked 1 goals 1. One of them was a pretty impressive shot from the boundary. He just X-Score had him scoring 2, so they thought his behind was very likely, and that goal that he kicked most of the times would have been a behind. So And obviously, that's good for Papley. But what it's saying is Starcevic absolutely shut down Tom Papley. Like, he had very little influence. And hell, even as some of his 10 possessions were fairly late, I think he had I think it was 4, maybe 5 disposals for the first half.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So yeah. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely shut him down. And obviously the work coming back. Like, all of Brisbane were tuned in for the rebound off intercept. But Starcevic had that in mind and was able to generate the most intercepts. Yeah. It's just really solid again.
Pretty much. And then the little spark in the first quarter, who ended up pretty much bursting the game wide open in the second, Kyle Lohman. He got the crowd pumping very early. 3 goals in the first half, finished with 4 overall, including 15 disposals, 12 effective, which equates to 80% efficiency, 6 contested possessions with 1 contested mark, 5 marks, 3 of them inside 50, a goal assist, 7 score involvements, 4 tackles with 1 of them inside 50, 11 pressure acts, 5 ground ball gets with 2 of them forward 50, and 209 meters gained.
Yeah, if there was any player that you would highlight from Brisbane, how bad defensively one-on-one they were, I would say it was Kyle Oman, because obviously he was playing that wing sort of forward line, but as soon as he went inside 50, it was just like a plague was around him, because I think he took 1 semi-contested mark, but there was a lot of the times he was unchecked there. And he wasn't the only player. They for some reason left Danaher unchecked a lot of the time in the forward 50, and a few others, but Kai just knew he had an avenue to score goals, and he ran forward, but he was also good at setting up the chains purely in the wing. A lot of it was very early, but it was so influential. It's like an X Factor game, but in a lot of games, that X Factor normally comes in the last half, where his was, he just set up the win, basically. Very impressive performance.
Yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, because, the stats say for themselves, but granted, he was always just in the right position at the right time. He was reading the play extremely well, knew when to sneak away into a bit of space, when to put pressure onto any of the opponents in the forward 50. He was doing everything right. Next on my list is Darcy Fort, who, obviously everyone knows replaced the Big O because the Big O was ruled out. I thought he stood tall despite not matching up, stat-wise against Brody Grundy, but he finished with 19 hitouts with 5-2 advantage, 12 disposals, 7 of them effective, equating to 58.3% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 2 marks with 1 of them inside 50, and inside 50 as well, 4 clearances, sadly a behind and not a miracle goal, 5 score involvements, 3 tackles, 11 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 1 ground ball get, and 171 meters gained.
Yeah, and look, I joked about on the Discord server where we have a bit of a chat. This was how can I forget? Billy Frampton marked to the game. Obviously he wasn't so niche in his role. He had to just do a serviceable job, and he did. But I think Brisbane will be so thankful because, as I said, up against Brody Grundy, it's not like Grundy hasn't just flat out beaten an opponent. And, as I said, you could argue that eventually he sort of did, but when it mattered early, he really stood up. And, in order for Brisbane to get that early jump, it probably would have happened anyway. But this was all the pieces coming together to get some of the huge discrepancies that we saw in this game. You can't, it wasn't the highest rating game. Look, it probably wasn't even a top half of the team performance. But definitely in terms of what you want to see, absolutely great performance. And, just talking about in general, how good was it to see Oscar McInerney get behind his boy at the end of the siren?
Absolutely.
Obviously he would have had some internal reservations, that, a Bob Murphy in 2016. Yeah, maybe 2026, who knows? Oliver will take his Bulldogs premiership and coming out of retirement. But yeah, so it was heartbreak, but he's just such a positive individual. And even afterwards, like Oscar McInerney, I think was at the Brisbane AFLW game on Monday. Oh yes, sorry, yeah, he was on Monday. So, he didn't even take some time off to, get over it or whatever. He was just getting around, getting involved with football still. And, that's sort of the players that you need around the club to, not only win premierships, but to foster a really good winning culture.
Yeah.
So, absolute props. And,
Massive agree.
who knows, like that's the sort of people like next year that will give them hunger to try and win another one.
For sure, for sure. All right, next on my list is Joe Danaher, who does what Joe Danaher does. He kicked 2-4, but which probably should have been 6 goals. To be honest, he probably should have just blew everyone away. But he finished with 16 disposals, 9 of them effective at 56.3% efficiency, 9 contested possessions with 2 contested marks, 8 marks with 4 of them inside 50, 5 inside 50s overall, a hit out, which was also to advantage. Fun fact. 4 clearances, 2 goal assists, 12 score involvements, a tackle, 4 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, 2 ground ball gets with 1 of them forward 50, 394 meters gained, and 100% time on ground. Who, apart from Connor McKenna, is the only Brisbane player to have 100% time on ground.
Yeah, obviously it depends how you measure that stat. Yeah, as I said, 11% time on ground, but 100% of that 11%, works 100% of the time, 90% of the time, sort of thing. Yeah, but such a big dual threat because you could tell early, like that's how you could tell early that Sydney just were off because the way Jay Danaher, I know it's been a bit. I won't even say hit him. It's been relatively consistent, but it's been like Jay Danaher consistent. So it's just like, the goal accuracy. He'll just like randomly shank a few. But it's like a play you have to respect a lot. And they're just it's hard to say there wasn't a lack of respect for him because obviously I don't think they were planning to have him as loose as he was. But, they were playing on him like they would maybe approach a Logan Morris.
Yeah.
And Logan Morris had a good game. Like, they couldn't even contain him. So, it's just, yeah. I don't want to harp on about too much. We're going to obviously give a lot of props to Danaher. He was very lively. He was very active. Very solid, I thought. I thought supporting Darcy Fort in the ruck.
Yep.
Because obviously that's the other important thing, for Darcy Fort to not feel isolated mentally was very important for Brisbane. So, as I said, maybe it was because Jay Danaher was so willing and able to help out, backing him up. He could play with a bit more confidence. He knows. But it's just so useful to have.
Yeah, completely agree. Being able to have that flexibility of even sometimes like we saw last week where he just suddenly appears in the backline out of nowhere. Like having to have be able to have that flexibility is a massive asset.
And Joe always does Joe things. Like there's no doubt about that. But he'll never not do what he's asked. Like sure he'll do some dumbass, snap around the boundary, try and take a run on inside 50. But that's after doing his job as a forward 50 player.
Yeah.
And when he goes back, it's not he's not the best defensive player, but he does keep his opponents fairly honest when he plays that floating spare man. He's not a liability. It's just, I guess when he gets it from halfback, you don't want him having too much space. Otherwise he'll probably try and take a gallop down the field. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly
it's
right.
Historically, it's you don't want the forwards to get it because they're so unwilling to take possessions in the back line, where Joe Danaher is the complete opposite. You don't want to let him too loose, but you like his endeavour either way.
Yeah, agreed. Speaking of the back line, co-captain Harris Andrews was as dependable as ever down there. He finished with 16 disposals at 100% efficiency, so all 16 were effective. 3 contested possessions, only 1 contested mark, 7 intercepts, 4 intercept marks, 10 marks overall, 4 score involvements, 3 pressure acts, 11 1%ers, 6 spoils, and 92% time on ground.
Yeah, and as I said, sort of floating between a few of the top forwards. I think he mainly stayed on McLean, plus anyone that sort of switched forward. I think it was on Parker at certain times. I think he might have also taken Heaney, or maybe it was Blakey when he switched forward. I think it was one of the rotating ones.
Mhm.
Um, so again, typical Andrews games, like he doesn't always take the best defenders, but he'll create those intercepts while the others do the hard work. And while I don't think it was like the best defender, like if you ranked every defender, like you'd be in the top. Most of the top five would just be Brisbane players, and he was a very solid contributor. Um, you know, Although I thought it didn't quite stand out compared to some of the other games. This was still like I'd say it's still an above average Harris Andrews game. It
I
was
agree.
just, yeah.
I mean, you didn't. To be fair, like as the game kind of went on, you didn't have to do all that much.
Well, yeah, no, because the ball went forward a bit much, but yeah, it was a bit more uncontested. Like Brisbane sort of let a few, like they weren't clamping down as hard. I think a lot of their intercepts actually came in the second and third quarter. Um, so um, yeah, pretty much did his job early, did his job well, and as I said, as I said, McLean, he was one of the people that had a bit of a shocker. As both backup ruck and forward. So can't say he didn't do his job there. And yeah, as I said, none of the other players that went forward really presented much of note.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, next on the list is Dane Zorko. Did his usual hard work off halfback with 26 disposals, with 25 of them effective, equating to 96.2% efficiency. 8 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 10 marks, 5 score involvements, 6 tackles, 18 pressure acts, 1 1%er, 7 ground ball gets, and 455 meters gained, which was, I believe, one of the highest meters gained stats of the entire game.
Yeah, I think Chad Warner actually finished up the one most. I think it was like 650 odd. 656.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So 656, Nick Blakey 491, Dane Zorko 455.
The highest Brisbane
Most of
rated player.
Brisbane. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Um
just did his usual job. Like he
yeah,
can't say much
I think he
else.
benefited a lot from Sydney playing, say, uncontested. A couple of errors early, but it was just one of those performances where he just did Zorko things for basically 3 quarters. Um, you know, yeah, not much to say about it. Like he is a very great attacking halfback. I mean, you could probably argue, like with Dan Houston going down, he's probably the best in the league in like that terms. Um,
Yeah, I
as
mean, I
like
think the final
staying
series
halfback
probably says
and
that
setting
much.
up.
Like considering they had to
Yeah,
play all 4 games, we got to see like how composed he was throughout all of them.
yeah, for sure. And as I said, in terms of like defensive structure, obviously he's not playing that shutdown defensive role. But when you have so much goodness around you, like he just had the freedom to play a Dane Zorko like game, and he played it really good. As I said, a couple of errors in the first, but like as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if like he was near maybe like of his like what 4% disposal inefficiency. I think probably like 2.5 happened in the first quarter,
Yeah,
and then it was just
all right.
almost perfect.
All right, let's move on to another composed as ever player, Hugh McCluggage. He finished with 21 disposals, 15 effectives at 71.4% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, an intercept, 5 marks, 3 clearances, 6 score involvements, 6 tackles with 3 of them inside 50, 29 pressure acts, 1 1%er, 5 ground ball gets, and 358 meters gained.
Yeah, very, very solid game. I thought while Lockie Neal sort of, struggled to get into it, but he was just playing a very half and half battle with Rowbottom. Obviously, both got aspects of their game going, but it definitely, once the game got freed up, lifted a lot from there. So with both of them sort of nulling each other out in that first quarter, Hugh McCluggage, I thought really stepped up,
Mm-hmm.
got a few clearances, was involved in a lot of link-up play, and, as I said, like, the fact that, Neil couldn't quite get as much separation as he wanted, McCluggage was getting that separation, so he's involved in a lot of chains as well. So typical McCluggage is just wherever you need him. He may not be the best midfielder per se out of all of them, but he's always the most, well, I won't say the most dependable because I mean, Brisbane has some pretty dependable midfields, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's hard not to respect, you know, how consistent, you know, Brisbane's midfield would be without Hugh McCluggage. Like, it just wouldn't be the same.
Agreed. Now moving on to the only two-time premiership player in this squad, also the only player to win two premierships against the team that his dad played for, that he probably should have been playing for but didn't, is Josh Dunkley. He
Yeah.
played hard contested
And
ball, as he always does. Sorry, go on.
oh, sorry, I was going to say, you're forgetting one of the other obscure things, and the only player to win in a team that finished outside the top four twice.
Twice. That's true, because the Doggies finished 7th in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, he played hard contested ball, as he always does. Finished with 21 disposals, 17 effective at 81% efficiency, 10 contested with 1 contested mark, 2 intercepts, 8 marks with 1 inside 50, 2 inside 50s overall, 4 clearances, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements, 11 tackles, 24 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, 5 ground ball gets, 1 spoil, and 275 meters gained.
Yeah, as I said, like, not as impactful, or sorry, not, I won't say impactful, because, you know, again, he was very solid. Like, it's so hard when so many Brisbane players had really good games. He wasn't as noticeable as the other midfielders, but you couldn't deny that, you know, he was just doing his job. You know, as I said, sometimes that's all you need, obviously, in a grand final, but, like, you know, sometimes the most damaging thing is to be a second option that you need to make accountable. And when Sydney is struggling to make your first options accountable, you know, it's just so deflating where, you know, if they do lock up someone like, you know, Lachie Neale in the first quarter, maybe Hugh McCluggage isn't there, then pops, blah, 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 blah. What are we talking about? Dunkley. Yeah. Sorry, brain's a bit fried. So many Brisbane players to remember and talk about, you know, it's just
I mean, they all
ridiculous.
had great games, so it's pretty hard
Yeah.
to single them all out like properly. Next on the list is Jarryd Berry, who I thought had great hands all afternoon. Finished with 20 disposals, 18 of them effective at 90% efficiency. 4 contested possessions with a contested mark, 5 intercepts with 2 intercept marks, 10 marks overall with 1 of them being inside 50, 4 inside 50s overall, a clearance, a goal assist, 6 score involvements, 3 tackles, 12 pressure acts, 2 ground ball gets, and 379 meters gained.
Yeah, again, like another player that was sort of overshadowed by how good I think Kyle Oman and sometimes Calamachi were on the wing. But Jarryd Berry, as I said, made it a dual threat. Like, you know, as I said, like, it's amazing that this sort of quality game doesn't quite come up immediately. You know, for this performance to be the second best wing performance is pretty staggering, really. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. And a pretty great final series, too. You know, like, again, I don't think we've rated him in the top 5 all that much, but he's definitely, like, being consistently getting 10s. And, you know, Jarryd Berry, like, you wouldn't exactly put him as the sort of player that would be like a finals, you know, um, high level, like, you know, like, but, you know, he had better final series than probably like, you know, Charlie Cameron. I guess there's not really that much for Brisbane, you know, a lot of them did well, but, you know, maybe Cam Rayner, you know, some of the star players that, you know, were allowed to be a bit quiet this final series because so many of the other Brisbane players stood up.
Yep, agreed. Next on the list is young Jasper Fletcher. I thought he was a great ball carrier through the midfield. 18 disposals, 15 effective, equating to 83.3% efficiency. 1 contested possession, 2 intercepts, 7 marks, 3 inside 50s, 1 goal assist, 4 score involvements, 1 tackle, 7 pressure acts, 1 ground ball get, and 425 meters gained. So he mostly did a lot of ball movement, but that's all they really needed from him, to be fair.
Yeah, again, as I said, they just had so many options. Like, it was mind-boggling how, again, like a team that we were talking about being like this restricting team. And, you know, I guess maybe at the end of it, I'll ask you a question. But yeah, as I said, he was just someone who was, you know, running around, not quite unopposed, but definitely found enough space. And yeah, his run and carry was pretty fantastic for the young player. Again, a fringier player just putting in the work, getting it done.
I mean, you don't have to ask too much of him. He's given a task and he does it well. Next on my list is Zach Bailey, who I thought actually had a quiet game compared to the rest of the finals games that he played, which is obviously all of them. He finished with 17 disposals, 16 effective, so 94.1% efficiency, 4 contested possessions with 2 contested marks, 2 intercepts, 9 marks overall with 2 of them inside 50, 4 inside 50s, a goal. Actually, I'm reading Cam Rainer's. Excuse me.
Okay.
My eyes drifted.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it seemed a bit.
sorry, he still had 17 disposals, 16 effective at 94.1% efficiency, so that's still correct. But 3 contested possessions, 2 intercepts, 7 marks, 3 inside 50s, 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements, 1 tackle, which was inside 50, 6 pressure acts, 3 ground ball gets, which was one of them was in forward 50, and 273 meters gained.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to point out, I thought it was actually Zach Bailey on him, but it was Jasper Fletcher. He was actually the one running with Errol Goulden for much of the game. So, yeah, that, for Fletcher's game, that should also be mentioned because that was obviously a very important thing.
Definitely very important.
But Zach Bailey, again, as I said, he's more of a forward-generating player, very uncontested, but Sydney sort of allowed him to, and, as I said, very useful.
Yeah, pretty much. Next is, if you couldn't tell, Cam Rayner is next. I thought he was quite influential through the midfield, even though he didn't have as high numbers as, your Ashcroft and your Lachie Neales. But he finished with 16 disposals with 10 effective, equating to 62.5% efficiency, 4 contested possessions with 2 contested marks, 2 intercepts, 9 marks overall with 2 of them inside 50, 4 inside 50s, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements, 1 tackle, 15 pressure acts, 2 ground ball gets with 1 of them forward 50, and 311 meters gained.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Rayner is, unfortunately, the 4 shots that resulted in his only 1 goal. Like, he was active. He didn't really complete a lot, but yeah, he was, it's not like Cameron in a way. Like, as I said, I think Cameron probably had a worse game. Whereas said, while Rayner wasn't able to find the goal sticks himself, he was at least involved in applying a few pressure things and getting involved in chains of play that would generate others.
Yep, agreed. Next on my list is Darcy Wilmot. He finished with 15 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 80% efficiency, 3 contested possessions, 5 intercepts with 2 intercept marks, 8 marks overall, 1 inside 50, 1 clearance, 2 score involvements, 2 tackles, 8 pressure acts, 3 ground ball gets, and 199 meters gained. He played a smaller role, which is what he normally does, but he plays it very well and is very effective.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it's ridiculous how good the halfbacks were for Brisbane. It was almost like a wall before you got to like the deep wall of their, tall back line. So, yeah.
Next on my list is Ryan Lester, who we actually mentioned earlier, being quite influential in halfback. He finished with 15 disposals, 12 of them effective at 80% efficiency as well. 2 contested possessions, 1 of them being a contested mark, 3 intercepts, with 1 of them being an intercept mark, 11 marks overall, 2 inside 50s, 3 score involvements, 4 tackles, 11 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 1 ground ball get, 3 spoils, and 220 meters gained.
Yeah, and I think, like one of my favorite plays from earlier in that grand final was Ryan Lester finding himself in the middle, and I think he just kicks the long ball to Cal Archie, who then runs into an open goal. Might have been Lohman, I forgive.
It was one of the two.
Whichever one it was.
Yeah.
But I think that was just like the difference between the two teams. It's like Brisbane were finding so many options, that, Ryan Lester, because he was very solid defensively. As I said, he took, especially when Heaney came forward, Lester made sure he had like next to no impact, along with Harris Andrews occasionally. But, as I said, he also just found moments to be aggressive. And I know he made a couple of mistakes. But yeah, as I said, it was just really fun to watch and a pretty great performance in, what was a pretty great final series by him.
I just
As I said, I felt I was
yeah,
unlucky not to vote for him last week.
yeah,
You
I
know, in my votes, but
I agree because he was massively influential last week as well.
yeah, exactly.
I
Um,
just went through my
although,
notes and I just realized that there was actually one player that I missed out on writing on,
yeah,
and it was Kalavachi.
yeah, I was thinking why it was taking so
Why?
long.
Yeah, I just realized I completely forgot about him. So I'll cover
All
him
right,
at the
well,
end of all the players because I've still got a
yeah,
few to
sure.
go. Next on my list is Noah Answorth, who I thought was very composed against Sydney's super midfield, predominantly because they were all getting shut down very well. He finished with 15 disposals, 13 of them effective at 86.7% efficiency, two contested possessions, three intercepts, with one being an intercept mark, 6 marks overall, one inside 50, six score involvements, three tackles, 12 pressure acts, two ground ball gets, and 302 meters gained.
Yeah, as I said, it's completely ridiculous, like how many halfbacks for Brisbane. I think almost all of them ended up with above 5 score involvements. Let's give that a little check. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, you still got Harris Andrews with 4, Ryan Lester with 3. So you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, even some of the players that were playing a bit deeper got involved. So, yeah, pretty crazy how much they were able to generate.
Okay, I've got Archie's stats here now, so I'll talk about it now. So he finished
Yeah.
with 14 disposals at 78.6% efficiency, 282 meters gained, five contested possessions, 6 marks, one inside 50, obviously 4-1 scoreline, kicking four very important goals, two goal assists, 11 score involvements, two tackles, nine pressure acts, one percenter, two ground ball gets, with one of them being forward 50. Obviously, 11 of his disposals were effective. He had 5 marks inside 50, two contested marks, two tackles inside 50, and one spoil as well.
Yeah, honestly, like absolutely fantastic offensive game. You know, considering like none of the smalls for Sydney got involved, like you know, to see the other way, players like Kalachi, Kyle Lohman get involved, absolutely fantastic. And as I said, don't forget, like it wasn't so much a job; it was more of a run with role with Blakey. But you know what I'm saying? It's like that not only exposed Blakey's weakness, which is more of the one-on-one matchups. You know, it's why I was a bit hesitant to say he was an All-Australian this year. But not only did he do that, he limited his run as well. Like he was playing like a tagging role almost while still kicking 4 goals, 1. So yeah, absolutely terrific game. Involved in almost everything early, as I
Absolutely.
mentioned.
All right, next on my list is Charlie Cameron, also known as Ego Too Much for the Kids. He was quietly influential up forward, but did also have like a pretty quiet game overall. Especially, like I think mostly as you know things started to heat up, you know, in that second and third quarter, he was a lot more involved in at least packs and like creating contests, but
Mm.
he didn't really hit the scoreline much at all. But he finished with 14 disposals, 7 of them effective, equating to 50% efficiency, five contested possessions, one intercept, 6 marks, with two of them inside 50, two inside 50s overall, a 1-2 scoreline, one goal assist, six score involvements, two tackles, 12 pressure acts, two ground ball gets, with both of them forward 50, and 171 meters gained.
Yeah, pretty much. And as you said, like it wasn't a good Charlie Cameron game. But in terms of like doing enough, it was definitely there because yeah, as I said, so many other players had opportunities. He just needed to at least provide a bit of pressure. He did take a few moments of his own. Obviously, it didn't work out, but you know, as I said, it's not because he was like shying away from the moment. You know, as I said, he just didn't work out for him. That sometimes happens, but
Mm.
you know, as I said, you can still contribute to the system, and he definitely did for Brisbane.
Yep, pretty much. Next on my list is Jack Payne, who, despite carrying an injury from 2 weeks ago, still soldiered on, managed to play a pretty solid game. Finished with 11 disposals, 9 of them effective at 81.8% efficiency, three contested possessions, four intercepts, with two of them being intercept marks, 8 marks overall, one clearance, two tackles, six pressure acts, 10 1%ers, two ground ball gets, eight spoils, and 137 meters gained.
Yeah, if memory serves me correct, he was on Logan McDonald.
I
Um,
believe it was either on McDonald or it was on Amadi, I think.
it could have been actually. I'm just checking. It says here, he was on a Marty, so I'll believe that. But yeah, as I said, it's sort of hard because he was just playing that pillar role.
Mm.
Sometimes you need a player to play so strongly one on one for other players. Again, like um, ba- 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 ba, Andrews to come and intercept. I mean, even arguably, you could argue some of his performance let Starcevic get some. So yeah, as I said, like terrific role play. Like for a key defender, it's almost as decent a game as you could probably ask.
Yeah,
It's
pretty
just,
much.
as I said, never really come out in the stats, but still like a very 7 or 8 out of 10 performance.
Yeah, completely agreed. Next on my list is Eric Hipwood, who kicked a miraculous goal from the boundary, channeling a bit of Jason Ackermanis with his celebrations. He finished with 9 disposals, 8 of them effective at 88.9% efficiency, 3 marks, 1 inside 50, an aforementioned goal, obviously, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements, 1 tackle, which was also inside 50, 8 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 1 spoil, and 171 meters gained.
Yeah, look, of all the people that were as I said, amazingly probably the worst performance of this Brisbane list. Like,
He was.
yeah,
I mean, granted, you can even just see it across this entire season. He's him, and as Archie has stepped up as they brought in Logan Morris. He has taken a much quieter role in the team.
yeah, it's just sort of awkward because it's playing this floating nothing role, which you hate to see. It's just drifting on the wing. He's playing a bit too high to get involved too much. Sometimes we'll whack him in defense. He had a few good games, got beaten a couple of times. But this is just sort of, I mean, you can't really knock him too much because I don't think it was systematically set up to have much of an influence. But, as I said, arguably it would be the worst performer for Brisbane, and he still had a very influential goal and a couple of good moments, so that's just sort of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, he still won a premiership, did he not?
Yeah, exactly.
Next on my list is the aforementioned Logan Morris, who was subbed out in the 4th, but played a very effective role up forward. He finished with 10 disposals, with 9 of them effective, equating to 90% efficiency. 5 contested possessions, with 2 of them contested marks. 2 intercepts, with 1 of them being an intercept mark. 6 marks overall, with 3 of them being inside 50. 2 inside 50s, a 2-1 scoreline, a goal assist, 6 score involvements, 1 tackle, which was also inside 50, 5 pressure acts, 2 ground ball gets, which one of them was in forward 50, and 259 meters gained.
Yeah, honestly, it was a bit of a shame to see him subbed off. You know why you do it, because, as I said, obviously they were winning enough of that area, or basically any area, and they were just you know what, you're a young kid, you got a lot ahead of you, we'll just make sure Connor McKenna gets a bit of time on ground. That was sort of, he only had 66% time on ground, and he kicked 2-1, had a really good marking performance. Yeah, as I said, for a young kid, just get excited about him because he's going to be the player that I know they've got a few players from this crop that will probably be huge losses, but in terms of their future, as I said, you got Logan Morris, you got Kyle Lohman, you've got Ashcroft, you've got Darcy Wilmot. There's just so many young kids for Brisbane to where you hope they'll at least finish high for the next or the rest of the decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's and you look back on his debut game, which happened after he played a full VFL game. He played full 4 quarters of VFL footy, then had to come in to the starting 22. Didn't even start as a sub. Played another 3 quarters of footy, not even wearing his own boots, barely having anything to eat, and has now managed to fit perfectly into this team and become a premiership player. That's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, as I said, just you got to have a lot of respect for some of these kids taking the opportunity in what is a pretty stacked side. As I said, he's essentially pushed Eric Hipwood out the forward line. Well, at least deep anyway. So, yeah.
And then last but not least is, the unsung sub. I'm pretty sure he was a substitute in all 4 finals games. Connor McKenna. He played a small role late in the fourth. Obviously, didn't do much because there wasn't much more to do. But he finished with 3 disposals, with all of them effective, so 100% efficiency. 1 contested possession, 2 marks, 1 ground ball catch, which was also in forward 50. And I think he had like 60 meters gained or something like that. Something pretty small. But
35.
oh, there you go. But, it wasn't much
I mean,
more
it
to
was
be
more
asked
than
of him.
Harris Andrews.
Yeah, but Harris Andrews is also doing a lot of different
I
stuff.
know. I know. Yeah. Are the only 2 players for Brisbane to get under 100 meters gained. And yeah, if you want a slightly more damning stats, I think it's about 10 for Sydney who got under 100. So yeah, a lot of difference in territory there.
Absolutely. But yeah, like I think he's an unsung player for this final series. I'm pretty sure he was the sub in all 4 games. Filled a role when he needed to, and congratulations to him. I think definitely getting picked up by Brisbane after taking some time away, going back home to Ireland. Definitely the right move for his career.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, sure, he's basically essentially being a third sort of speedy player, can play wing, can play halfback. Obviously, when Kitty Coleman went down, sort of obviously Kai Lohman sort of, well, not directly replaced. Obviously, we've mentioned before how like Kai Lohman's gone more the forward role, Zach Daly sort of covering the middle and all that sort of thing. But yeah, or Jasper Fletcher even. But for Connor McKenna, to have such a reliable player be that third string, and I guess it's a good time to bring it out, We talk a lot about Sydney's depth. Like, they didn't have to test their depth. And, they still put out that. Whereas, like Brisbane Lions were playing essentially third string, second options in this game and won comfortably. So you've really got to credit the Chris Fagan and obviously the system that he was able to create, because so many players, I know the top start of the season was rough, but once they solidified, once they got their game plan, they just never looked back.
Yeah, completely agreed. All right. Do we want to touch on the MVP votes, or do we want to do the Gary Ayers medal?
I think we'll do ours first and then compare them to the Gary Ayers medal.
Right, easy. All right. Do you want to start off then?
All right. Can you write them in?
Yes, I can. Let me just bring it up really quick.
Good, because I already know I can't spell some of these players.
All right. So to give the viewers an update as to well, not really an update, but a refresher. So during these final series, Sarek and I did our own individual MVP votes for pretty much for the Gary Ayers medal, but for our own standings. Presently, prior to the grand final, Heaney was on the top with 10 votes, Zorko and McCluggage on 5 votes, Warner, Neil, and Danaher on 4 votes. Somehow Tom Stewart made it into this list, even though he is not part of the Alive teams.
Oh no, an imposter. Yeah.
So
I can say that.
those are the current standings, and now these are the final tallies. So are you gonna do 1 to 5, or are you gonna do 5 to 1?
We'll go 1 to 5.
All right. So who gets your 1?
Starting off, we don't really need to scrum because we've already gone through all the games. But I put Kai Lohman as the 1 vote, as in he scores 1. Yeah, what we said, just very influential for the first half. Not unsided in the last half, but definitely, very early influence. He was one of the best attacking players on the ground. I think the best attacking player, I'm going to say later. But in terms of transition, in terms of movement, I'm always able to generate. There's really not much to say. Absolutely fantastic performance by him.
Yep.
Like, probably one of the best ones on this list, to be honest.
All right. Who is getting your 2 votes?
Number 2, I have gone with Brendan Starcevic. The lockdown ability he had on Papley, combined with his intercept game, and his able to generate, and he was still able to generate as part of Brisbane's halfback movement. Absolutely fantastic. Very solid final series and very deserving of the 2 votes.
Your 3 votes.
I have gone with Calamachi. As I said, 15 possessions, you might think that's a bit low for 3 votes, but again, it wasn't just what he was doing offensively. It was what he was able to do again on Nick Blakey, and just the fact that he was almost involved in every offensive performance, for Brisbane in that early quarter.
Agreed.
Early first half.
Agreed. All right, your 4
Now,
votes.
instead of the top 2, just for a bit of suspense, do you want to go 1 to 3 next?
Yeah, all right. But I'm gonna have to cut away from it on the screen. I'll come back to it because my votes are on my other sheet.
Oh, all right. I'll just
No, it's fine. I'll read them to you and you type them in for me.
All right, sure.
All right, so my 1 vote, and this might be a little controversial actually. My 1 vote goes to Lachie Neale.
Ooh.
And partially because I wanted to spice it up a little bit, but also because, like, whilst I thought obviously, he had one of the best players on the ground, no doubt about it. I thought there were more players that were a little bit more influential, on the front half and the back half, whereas he was predominantly influential through the midfield, and that's why he gets my 1 vote, because I think the high influence in the half-back and half-forward were more important in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So who gets my 2 votes is Kyle Oman, which, as we've kind of already gone through it. Like I said, I'm spicing it up. Again, he was that spark in that first half. He kicked 4 goals overall. Like, you'd think that would equate him to get more votes, but it's just he's so much fun to watch, and again, there's not much more we can say after that we haven't already said.
Actually, I've got something to say.
Yeah?
He's probably the most Queensland-looking person on the Brisbane list.
Facts. That I can agree with.
Yeah.
Got a real sort of bogan energy about his look.
Surfer, I would say, but yeah, bogan maybe.
Yeah, it's about the same at this point.
Yeah.
All right, now who gets my 3 votes is Joe Danaher. Because, again, besides giving Darcy Fort job out in the ruck, he, again, very influential up forward, kicking 2-4, should have been 6 goals, to be honest, but had that massive impact and does what Joe does, appears everywhere where you need him to, and I thought it overall had a very, very impressive performance. All right, so I'm going to cut back, and yes, that looks good. Do you want to do your top 2, or do you want to do some honorable mentions?
I mean, we've sort of already gone through honorable mentions. I mean, I'll just try and list them off my head. I think that Froggy Lester probably, deserves to be up there. I think James Rowbottom, by far, or Robbie Fox, in any other final series, that might have been a 1 vote, but there's just so many Brisbane players. Who else? I mean, Joe Danaher would probably be up there. Like, again, if it wasn't for his conversion, as I said, the only thing that I'll say against him was probably because a lot of his behinds were early, it was sort of flirting a bit with danger. You probably want to see him convert, but in terms of forward effort, like, there's not really that much more you could ask for him. And then, I don't know, probably someone like Zach Bailey, maybe.
Yeah, Zach Bailey was in my honorable mentions. I put Darcy Fort in my honorable mentions as well. He was going to get my 1 vote, but I wanted to spice it up a bit more. Harris Andrews was also up there as well in my honorable mentions. There's definitely a fair few. Most of them defenders, let's be honest.
Yeah, true.
All right, who's getting your 4 votes?
I mean, look, he's obviously going to feature in both of our top 2. I would be very surprised if he wasn't. The Norm Smith for the day, Will Ashcroft. I think offensively, he was probably the best player on the ground. Even though Kalachi was involved in so many movements, Will Ashcroft's midfield performance, he was in the inside, he was on the outside, he was involved in a lot of transition. And so there's not really that much more you could ask for him offensively, and that's why I've got him number 2. If you rated grand final performances of all time, that will be right up there, and he's going to be splitting hairs with my number one, in my opinion.
Is it Lachie Neale?
Oh yeah, it's Lachie Neale. So yeah, I disagree with you a bit. I think he was very prominent defensively. I think there was a lot more to his game than just his clearance work, and his clearances were pretty fantastic. As I said, you could argue he had a quiet first quarter, but it really wasn't that bad when you looked at it. It was like,
No,
still
I'm not saying he had a bad quarter at all. I value the perspective of backline and forward line efforts rather than overall just everything being a midfield goal, like a midfield award essentially.
I mean, I do too. But it's very hard to look away from Lachie Neale. But as I said, it's just our opinions.
All right. Speaking of opinions, the player that is getting my 4 votes is Brandon Starcevich. And I don't think we've kind of already talked about. No, I've got it because I remember last year. I think not more really has to be said. We've kind of gone over it again. It was very, very influential in the back line. So much hard work. Managed to shut down so much of Sydney's forward momentum and bounce it back into scoring chains. And it's just, very much deserving, 1, of this premiership and 2 of my 4 votes.
Yeah. And obviously, adding to his family legacy, obviously his dad, single premiership winner for the AFLWs on multiple occasions. So, if you like coaching, Brandon, maybe do that after your career.
Yeah,
because you could be
definitely a good path.
Generational, yeah.
And then my 5 votes, which this is no surprise, because as you said, he should be in both of our lists, is the Norm Smith medalist, Will Ashcroft.
Yeah.
He was just, he's a Norm Smith medalist for a reason, right? He's just that good.
Yeah. Like I said, I had very little separation between Lachie Neale and Will Ashcroft for me. And, as I said, I thought, all of the top 5, I think, in any other, in any other final, those, in a vacuum, those were all, 5 worthy performances. At least for my list. I still disagree a bit on Danaher, but, in terms of, key forward influence, he played a really good game. It's just, he didn't convert. But, as I said, like I said, not much to say. All 5 of them would be high level performances, worthy of a Norm Smith. I didn't really care which way the vote went. Obviously, personally, I thought Neale was a bit better, but as I said, that's not to say that Will Ashcroft was not deserving, because he absolutely was. It was magical watching him in the first couple of halves. First half.
When
I mean first couple of quarters.
When the game was said and done, I was mostly looking at stats, and Neale was clearly their favorite stats wise. But it's just what Ashcroft was doing just on screen, on field, outside of the stats alone, was just magical to watch.
Yeah, as I said. I mean, I would argue that Neale was a bit more subtle, but again, as I said, and like you also probably say, there wasn't actually all that much difference. The difference between my first and last is probably near the same as your first and last, in the fact that it's not all that much.
Oh yeah, no, these are very minimal differences.
Yeah.
By points. So I believe that actually makes Will Ashcroft our coast to coast MVP for the final series on 12 points overall, if my math is correct.
Yes.
Because so Ashcroft finishes with 12 because he's got 3 previously. Starcevich finishes with 10. No, sorry, finishes with 9.
Yeah.
Lachie Neale finishes with 10.
Neale finishes with 10.
Danaher finishes with 7. Lohman finishes with 3. Archie finishes with 3. And no one else changes otherwise. So he needs to make top 3.
I mean, yeah, he deserved to be.
Well, yeah, because prior to this game, he was probably the best finals player at that point in time.
Yeah. And honestly, you probably show the Gary Ayers medal.
I'll jump over to that now. Here we are. Lachie Neale, the Gary Ayers award winner.
So, as I said, as much as, we obviously had a bit of a difference in rating Neil, he still got his, look, he doesn't need more rewards. I mean, he won a Brownlow when he
He's
probably,
got a
had a
Brownlow.
fairly...
He's got a Gary Ayers
Exactly.
medal. He's got a premiership.
So as I said, but in terms of, differences in, the final series, one of the more consistent ones, had the advantage of playing 4 games. I'm not sure if they, remove a game if they, like we
Oh,
would have if one of our players scored
well, there
4.
you go.
But
Neil is the
um,
first Brisbane player to win the Gary Ayers medal.
I mean, yeah, they didn't have it in.
No,
Oh, okay.
I don't know how recent it was introduced.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, how could they not have it in the freepeat? But I don't think it was introduced in. I think it's like a 2025 thing.
Scrolling down.
Along
Previous winners. It was first introduced in 2016. So there you go.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I say 2025, I obviously mean 2005.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But no, 2005 I think is the AFLPA award, and then
Yes.
2016 must be the finals.
Yeah, I think the Players and the Coaches Association was a lot earlier than that.
Yeah. So yeah, going through it, Lucky Neil finishes with 26.5. Also, the way they did it, obviously we had 2 people voting, so ours was weighted, but they've just loaded the finals vote by 1.5. That's why you got some players finishing on 0.5 there. So Lucky Neil, he got near perfect in the coach's spot. So I think they were like, one had him top and the other had him second. So that's how he got. And Ashcroft obviously tied in the finals. Then you got Isaac Heaney with 20, including obviously 2 perfect performances, much like our votes, and of course 0 in the finals. Will Ashcroft finishing third, 18.5, and the highest of the non-finals performance, Jarryd Newcomb on 15, pretty much equivalent to where we had him.
If we look at our MVP votes out of the eliminated teams, he was highest rated at 8 points, which obviously, taking Sydney out of the grand final now, that would put Heaney at the highest score. But prior to this, we highlighted Newcomb as probably the best finals player out of the eliminated teams.
And then you had Dane Zorko on 15, and he didn't actually register a vote in the final, so that's pretty impressive. Kalachi, 12.5, Jace Burgoyne, 10, Max Holmes on 10. And yeah, as I said, the rest is just the rest. So, if you compare it, probably fairly similar. I think it's, obviously a few differences. I think Jace Burgoyne finished in 2 votes. Maybe it was 3, maybe it was like a perfect and 2 singular.
We could take a look.
I guess
we can go back to the finals rounds if we want to briefly take a look.
Yeah, sure, why not? So we'll go through some of the biggest differences, I guess. Geelong versus Port. Probably the biggest difference is Mark Bicklavs. Who did I have that didn't? Yeah, no, it's pretty much the same. It's just Bicklavs. Because they have 2 different voters, you generally have more variety.
Yeah.
So yeah. So obviously Bicklavs got a bit rated, where, as I said, I just ranked Guthrie a bit higher. So not too much difference there. Bulldogs versus Hawthorn. Jarryd Newcomb obviously got the perfect votes there.
I think for the most part that's pretty accurate to what I gave them. I'm pretty sure I put Newcomb consistently like top 3.
Meeks there. The only one that isn't there, I think, is D'Ambrosio.
No, D'Ambrosio's there. He got 2 votes.
Oh, sorry, no, Watson. Watson's not there.
Yes, I voted Watson. That's right. Then Battle of the Bridge. Sydney and GWS. Obviously, Isaac Heaney is on top, which no one's surprised about either.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't like to think I'm a Tom Green hater, but I think there was just like a lot of great defensive performances. So I'll put Taylor in there.
Yeah.
They recognise Buckley, obviously. And I just put Peatling in there. Because as I said, I rated that defensive performances where they went a bit more offensive with players like Green, Jack Lloyd, and Josh Kelly.
Yep, agreed. And then obviously for Brisbane Carlton, Zorko stood out the most, as I'm pretty sure I put in my votes as well. I know Lachie Neale obviously stood up as well. again, yeah, it was a Brisbane demolishing. Everyone knows the story, obviously.
Yeah, you just want to recognise a few Carlton players. So,
Yeah, I tried to highlight a couple, but there was only so
yeah,
much.
I
Jump,
thought Hewitt was a bit stiff not to get in, but yeah.
jump.
For the coaches vote.
Agreed. Jumping over to week 2 with Port Adelaide and Hawthorn. Your assessment of Jace Burgoyne was very fair. Coaches' votes thought the
Yeah,
same.
yeah. I think they're all pretty similar. They put Scrimshaw in. I don't think I personally did. Um, yeah, I went almost all Port Adelaide. Oh, except Jai Newcombe, of course. But yeah, as I said, who's the one that isn't there? Oh, they didn't put in Frankie Evans. I'm a bit surprised about that actually. Um, I know I know Hinkley loves Frankie Evans, so but yeah, as I said, not too much of a surprise there. I thought I was very harsh not putting Scrimshaw in. I thought he had a pretty great game.
That's fair.
I hopefully mentioned him in the honourable mentions that week.
I think you did. I can't remember. It was 2 weeks ago.
Probably.
For GWS and Brisbane, they highlighted there was no perfect vote for this game, but they highlighted Jesse Hogan as the highest rated player in a losing side. Clearly, I mean that's fair. He did a lot during that game. He being the Coleman medalist, he stepped up massively. But again, you look at Jarryd Berry, Will Ashcroft, Kel Archie, Dane Zorko, pretty much the main key players in terms of shutting down GWS's run through that midfield.
Pretty much.
Keys up forward as well.
Yeah, not much difference except you gave one vote to Harris Andrews, so pretty much on par. Again, just different sort of styles. Different sort of players that we've sort of highlighted that we, makes it a bit different than the coaches.
Yeah. And then for last week with Sydney and Port Adelaide and Geelong and Brisbane.
That's right. These are your votes now.
Isaac Heaney was highlighted as the best player of field. I'm pretty sure I gave him the same sort of assessment. Chad Border and Ollie Florent, the coaches voted highly of, as well as Errol Golden, Nick Blakey, and Joel Amati. They didn't highlight anyone from Port, which kind of surprised about because I think there were at least like a couple of players that played decently for Port, but it wasn't fair Sydney demolition.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have given it to Amati. I don't know if I would have given votes to Amati though. I don't think I did.
Nah, you wouldn't have.
And
you
then,
were a Marty hater.
He's done nothing all finals. It's a fair judgment.
I mean, he was all right against Port, but yeah, Port weren't exactly playing all that well.
And then you did the votes for Geelong and Brisbane.
Yeah, probably the most differential. I guess I gave McCluggage the votes. Which again, I was a bit unsure about, but I still maintain he was the best four-quarter performer. Tom Stewart, again, I also put fairly high. Again, I didn't think he started off all too well, but I think his back half was pretty immense. And then the rest were pretty much straightforward.
Yeah, I pretty much said the same thing in my assessment. Is that I thought Tom
Stewart... they didn't have Starcevic either.
No, they didn't.
Wow. That's harsh.
But yeah, I thought Tom Stewart was one of their best players in that game.
Yeah. They had Graham Myers and whoever I put last, I think was on there. Oh, yeah. Ollie Henry and his 3 goals. 4 goals.
4 goals.
One for each goal.
And then
sort of nice.
And then obviously, as we touched on briefly, the grand final votes, they had Will Ashcroft and Lachie Neale equal at the top. Kel Archie at 7.5, Kyle Layman at 6, Brendan Starcevic with 3 votes, and Joe Danaher at 1.5 votes.
Yep. So obviously all represented.
Yep. And yeah, pretty much literally the same 6 players that we put our votes on, which is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So, yeah, it was pretty good. I had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah. Thought it was a great idea.
Hopefully we'll do the same next year. I can definitely not see us doing that in the regular season. No. I think that will be too much effort.
Too much effort.
But for the finals, I think that was really fun. And we hope you enjoyed maybe a bit of insight to how we personally rate players, because week by week it's very hard to always recognize the best. Obviously, especially with stats, we just go over them. It's a lot easier to highlight the best players because, the more stat gaining players because they're obviously the easiest. But we also hope you appreciate that we do value a lot of players that provide to the system. Yeah, and I think that was fairly represented. I was pretty happy with the diverse array of players. And again, congratulations to Will Ashcroft for winning the inaugural AFL Coast to Coast Finals MVP award. We are not rich
we do
enough
not
to
have
send you a
anything to give
trophy.
you, just recognition.
Yeah, you can look. I'll tell you what. If you're ever in WA, you can have a dinner date with me. I'll send you to. We'll go to a Nando's. I'll shout. Just hit me up. You know where to find me. It's on our socials. I've also learnt out after this season. I've been pointing the wrong way to the camera. To point to the socials.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're. Actually, I think you're flipped. I can't remember. I think you're flipped from my end. So I think your left is the right direction. I don't know. Cameras.
So yeah, now that is the final bit of the regular season. I'm hopefully pointing to the socials whenever I do that now.
We have one more bit of news to touch on, which pretty much caps off the final notable thing for the season, and that is the West Coast Eagles' new head coach, which, as announced as of yesterday, is former Richmond interim coach taking over from Damien Hardwick. Obviously, was an assistant coach prior, and then he went to Melbourne when Uze got the Richmond gig. Andrew McQualter, aka Mini. He has officially signed on. I don't know how big his contract is. It's probably I don't think it's in the article that I currently have here. But, congratulations to him. He's done a lot of hard work to be able to put himself in this position, obviously. We're not going to touch on this week, in this episode. We're also going to take a break next week, as the trade period starts, and that way we'll just let all the news and stuff build up, and we can touch on that all in one shot the week after. But according to trade news, he is going to take a couple of Richmond players with him, so we will touch on that in 2 weeks. But yeah, congratulations to him for signing on and moving to WA.
Yeah, obviously a very hard gig when you got a very football focused state and only 2 teams, one of them obviously finishing bottom 4. It's a very hard gig to get. But obviously with that Richmond connection, you're able to bring a few players over, probably what they need, with obviously Baker especially, and they're looking to get the player that Port were thinking of getting, Jack Graham.
Yeah, because Jack Graham's from South Australia, which is why everyone thought he was going to go to Port.
Yeah.
But no, he's going to go with Bakes and Mini.
You'd be surprised. Sometimes that's very important for players. Not even your main coach, but sometimes you just get such a rapport with a lower level coach, whether it be a midfield coach or whatever.
Yeah.
I think McQualter was he a midfield coach at Richmond?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so as I say, get a bit of rapport. So yeah, hopefully he'll grow. Hopefully West Coast can get some stuff. Obviously, if it was, if I am correct in thinking as a midfield coach, West Coast can desperately need a few more ideas in the midfield. Have a tiny bit of talent there. Develop Harley Reid. Get a bit more consistency out of clearances and be able to set up the offense. And then, as I said, they'll obviously probably lose Barras in the off season.
Yep.
But their defense, I know I'm giving a bit of an early preview, but fingers crossed that they'll have enough of defense to where, even though it is a tough sell, there might be some things to work with, and he might hopefully hit the ground running.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we have a lot of questions for West Coast as a whole. Again, we've touched on this throughout the season, but I think Mini is the right decision for them. Obviously, as per every team, when they get a new coach, it will take a while for them to actually, have a steer clear with a good vision and a solid build of the team that they want. Do I think West Coast already have some of those good pieces? Yes, absolutely. But it's definitely going to be another couple of years for them to slowly get out of bottom four and be the strong, I wouldn't say the strong contending team, but like a decent contending team that we know that they can be.
Yeah, I think it's more like the aim isn't quite to, like obviously they need to improve a bit, but I think they need like 2 mediocre years while they, lose some of that higher end talent. That's going to make them a bit more likely to be, not competitive, but not woeful like they have been. And then obviously build up some of their talent, obviously build that core and the next midfield around Harley Reid and friends.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then in terms of obviously that now leaves a spot open in Melbourne's coaching ranks because that's where he currently was. Again, like we have a lot of questions about Melbourne as well going into this off season. We'll touch on that in a couple of weeks, I'm sure.
Mm.
And yeah, just congratulations to him, and hopefully he enjoys his time over in Perth.
Yeah, hopefully maybe, I think Simo, he's got like what, 3 Hungry Jacks franchises? Maybe you can
Maybe you can give
shove
him
him
one at
one,
least.
Maybe that was part of the deal. I don't know how back deal that is, but West Coast needed a coach. And I will say, like, considering how there was a few question marks on how many people wanted to coach at this West Coast job to get at least logical candidate before the trade period. It's very well done. Like, you say a lot about West Coast, and some of the list management decisions haven't been great, but they're not a rabble organization. Like they generally get stuff done when they need to.
Yeah.
And I said hopefully they'll get enough support. I know Don Pike, people have a few reservations about, but yeah, as I said, hopefully they have a good enough culture to get out of this slump sooner rather than later.
Yep. Big agree. All right. I believe that officially does it for the 2024 season. Next on the agenda is obviously the trade period. As I mentioned briefly, we are going to be taking next week off. We're going to let all, because the trade period starts on Monday. So we're just going to let all the news kind of build up over that week and a bit. And then the week after, which recording day will be the math on the top of my head. I have to actually look at the calendar. I can't remember for the life of me.
14th.
Probably the 14th or the 15th.
Today's the 1st?
Yes, today's the 1st, correct.
Oh no, we're 13th because today's Tuesday.
13th is a Sunday, so.
All right, there it was.
So 14th is correct.
Yeah.
So either the 14th or the 15th being the Monday, Tuesday for a recording day. We'll let all the news, all the trade news pretty much build up then. And we'll just bring it all to you all in one neat little package. Then after that, obviously, is the draft period. Teams are doing their best and fairest, I believe, this week as well. So we might tack that onto the trade period episode. Otherwise, that will do us for this week. Just a little bit of a shorter episode. Again, it was only one major game to talk about, the one that everyone was looking forward to, that ended up being a 60-point deficit. But, that's not a great look for Sydney, considering it's, one win, 4 losses over the past 15 years?
Yeah, it's that.
With 3 of them being by major deficits? So.
Yeah, no, it's just... it's so surprising. But, as I said, it still takes a lot of skill to get there. So hopefully next time will be better for the Swanee fans.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, again, we'll talk about this probably in a couple of weeks when we do, when we look at, the draft or trade period stuff about like what teams could need. Hopefully Sydney do get that strong forward that they've been after. Like we know Jake Stringer was in talks for a bit there. I don't know how that's going. We'll find out when the trade period starts, clearly. But yeah, other than that, let's hope that 2025 is a good season for them.
I mean, yeah, I guess. Look, as I said, I don't think Sydney is starved for success as a franchise, so they can flounder for all I care. I don't get as disappointing as this year, though.
But to cap us off, congratulations once again to Brisbane, 2024 premiers. Well deserved.
Yep.
Again, congratulations to Will Ashcroft, 2024 Norm Smith medalist. And again, also
Lachie
congratulations
Neale,
to
Gary
Lachie
Ayers
Neale for the
medalist.
Gary Ayers medal, and also him and Harris Andrews for getting the inaugural, blanking on name right now, medal that they now give to captains.
No, it wasn't Ron Barassi. Yeah, Ron
Yes, it
Barassi.
is the Ron Barassi medal. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Congratulations on being the first recipients of the Ron Barassi medal.
Yep.
And yeah, that's where we will leave you for this week. Thank you all so much for coming and hang out. Again, go check us out on all of our socials. Again, we'll probably be a little bit quiet going into next week because we're taking that week off. But we might pop a little bit on there. Just, maybe a little quiz thingy, something like that. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a bonus episode where we just do a bunch of quizzes and stuff. Who knows what we'll do?
Yeah, and keep an eye out. We might do some of that on Blazer's stream if he wants to.
Yeah.
And if not, we'll just pop it up whenever.
I got time to kill. Although, not this weekend, but next weekend is PAX.
No.
So I'm going to be busy for that period of time since you're not coming over.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing because we could have done an in-person episode.
Yeah, I know that the flight between Melbourne and Perth is pretty expensive, and I don't have money. I've got time. I've got time to give you stats. I can't buy the stats off Champion data though.
Unfortunately,
that's where I'm at.
Such is life, sadly.
Such is life.
But yes, thank you all again so much for watching, for listening, and we will see you all in 2 weeks for episode 33 and all of the trade period news that you are after. So until then, thank you once again, and we will see you then. Goodbye.